compared to parents of neurotypical children, and this is a summary of huge research out there, parents of children with disabilities experience greater amounts of stressors. So if you ask any parent anywhere to do that survey, they would all have things. But this has been done across the world and have more stressors. They also have greater amounts of compassion fatigue and burnout, which is the next stage beyond compassion fatigue, and lower levels of compassion and parenting satisfaction. And that's really problematic, because one of the things that helps you keep going when you are experiencing empathy towards another and having that compassion of wanting to support them is the moments of satisfaction. So those of us who went into this as a profession usually are people who have high levels of compassion. And so you get something out of giving to others. There's a lot of satisfaction that comes with that. But when you don't have a lot of satisfaction and you have a lot more of challenge and fatigue, then you're really in imbalance. And so we'll talk later about how you can shift that. These parents have a greater incidence of physical health difficulties. And I was looking at some really interesting research, and I've added a slide for you on the actual physical and chromosomal and DNA changes that not just can, but do happen as a result of stress. And also associated to that, because I didn't really know this till I started reading about the telomeres, but we know there's a much greater incidence of mental illness that's brought on as a result of dealing with caregiver stress. So here's a slide I've added, and this is not something I made, and it's not my area of expertise, so I won't, don't give me too many questions on this. But I thought it was just really interesting to look at this. So telomeres are things at the very end of our chromosomes, and apparently that's what they look like. And as we experience stress, especially chronic stress, it makes those telomeres get shorter and shorter and shorter. And as the telomeres get shorter and shorter and shorter, we age faster, we develop things like depression, things like diabetes, things like even various apparently chromosomal disorders that we may not have been triggered. And the other thing about this that's not just interesting but really concerns me, that I didn't know about till I started researching this, is it continues through generation. And so when children grow up experiencing a lot of caregiving or parenting stress, their telomeres are impacted, their DNA is impacted, and they can pass that on. So hugely important thing that I think just, we know these things happen, but the science of looking at our DNA, I think just really helps validate that. But I also want to say some good news is you can make changes that can make those telomeres rebound, grow a bit more, stop shrinking. So it's really, really important for your physical health, your mental health, your children's health, and your progeny for you to get that stress under control. Okay, so what are some of these specific stressors? And these have been identified by parents who have children with disabilities through the research. This particular, one of the studies I'm citing, there's lots, was by Cousino, Hobbs, and Arthur. And Lorraine Hobbs, just giving her a shout out, was my teacher for Making Friends with Yourself, which is a mindful self-compassion group for teens and children. So she's one of my mentors, and she's a family therapist, so she was involved in this research. So, high demands of the child, in particular when there's significant behavior. So across disabilities, when the behavior is significant and the severity of the order, but usually associated with challenging behavior, beyond any other stressor, that really stands out for parents and makes a big difference. Frequent interaction with medical treatment and school systems. Most parents aren't having to do this. Most of us, I know for me, before having children, I wasn't going to hospitals, going to treatment centers. I went to schools for my work, but not like, the regular parents who are maybe going to the, parent committee and dropping off their kids and having coffee and thinking it's all great. So there's a lot more interactions, and many of them are not positive. And I'll talk a bit more about that, how that causes stress. Lack of or inadequate treatment. So if you think of those, go back to that Bronfenbrenner systems model, right? There's a treatment center, but you can't get it. You're waiting too long for it. And then when you do get it, it's not what you hoped. It's not very good. It's not good quality. Those are stressors. Costs and hassles that are associated with access. And one of the things we know about hassles in general is hassles are more likely to lead to depression than major life events. So you can get divorced. It's not a good time, I can tell you that. But the chronic hassles that often lead up to it are much more disabling and much more stressful. So the costs and hassles. Getting treatment costs a lot of money. You can't always get it. It's not always funded. Those are stressors. And then financial difficulties on top of it. So if you have a child with special needs, now you've got to pay all this to get, speech and language support or medical interventions or medications. And you find, like I did in my case, I wasn't able to work full time and deal with a child who needed constant attention, who the school was calling me every other day to say, come and get him. I couldn't keep leaving work to do that. So you now have often parents who are in a worse financial state than before they had children. Parents with children with disabilities are overall in a worse financial state because one or sometimes both parents is not able to work. Marital stress, if it wasn't there before, we know that it is a huge predictor of having a child with a disability. It's just well researched. Very often leads to marital stress and much higher likelihood of separation or divorce. Lack of respite or downtime. So we'll talk about having downtime, but something you've got to do is take a break from things that are hard. Imagine if you went to the office or you went to your work every day and you were there for like 19 hours and then you went to sleep and you woke up by a jackhammer or something 3 times during that 4 hours of sleep, and then you had to go do it again. That's pretty exhausting. Worries. So worries about the day-to-day and then the future of your child. Social and community isolation. Now this is really important. Something we do as humans is something called social comparison. And so I think women are worse with that than men. So we're all like checking out each other's outfit. No, I like her hair, and her hair looks so much better than mine. I think I'm going to do that. And that's just a little bit of a vain thing. But we compare each other all the time. And so when we have children, you're now a parent. What parents do is, without being conscious of it, are comparing themselves to each other. And so what you can do that's actually more stressful is if you have a child with special needs, and I tried this, you can join a parenting kind of group, and all the parents there, if all the parents there have typical children and your kid isn't like that, that can be very stigmatizing for you, even if you don't want to feel that way. So there's that social comparison, and then what parents tend to do is then just not participate. Well, I'm not going to go to this mom and tot play group because I'm going to look like a really bad parent, which is how you feel, but it's also what you hear. Like, gee, what's with this woman? Can't she manage that kid? People tell you it in grocery stores, professionals tell you it, various people tell you, and I have a video clip I really hope we can see that shows the parent perspective on this. And then the other thing is you become more isolated because you just cannot participate in many things that you previously would like to do, or even as a parent with children could do. Like going out to a nice restaurant might be even harder if you have a child with special needs who's going to trash it, right? And so you become more and more isolated, more and more separated at a time when you really need more social support. That's a protective factor. And the stigma, self-criticism, as I mentioned, what happens with self-criticism, which is something we work on in mindful self-compassion, is it usually starts by external criticism, and then we internalize it. And so blame then, which is I'm not doing that well enough, becomes shame, which is I'm not good enough, right? You see the difference? So I'm not doing it well enough is something you can change, but I'm not good enough, I'm a bad parent, is shame. And parents who have children with special needs develop that. Not all of them, not all the time, but at a significantly, like hugely higher rate than parents of typical children. So this was an interesting study I read on Stigma and Chain, and it was Chain by Wong and Associates. And what she found was that it was especially if children have invisible disabilities, and so that can make sense, right? If they have ASD, you can't really see something obvious or some mental health disorder, so they look fine. They may talk fine, they may do lots of things. But then they display really socially inappropriate behaviors. That's the big thing that leads to this. So if the child is having difficulty walking and people can see that, that's not socially inappropriate. If the child's having difficulty, say, even using their hands and they have, things to support it, that's not socially inappropriate. What's socially inappropriate is a child who looks normal or an adult who looks normal and they're doing strange or weird things. They're flapping, they're talking to themselves, they're screaming. And people are like, hello, parent, here's this kid, do something about them. So those parents, as I mentioned, receive criticism a lot. So this has been frequent. How often does it happen compared to typical parents? Unsolicited judgment, because of course you're not asking for it. You're already stressed out. Your kid's having a tantrum. Like, you know what? This actually happened to me one time. I was picking my child up from being kicked out of school for the day after doing various things. And he's having a huge meltdown. He's kicking and screaming. He's scratching. He's about 6 at 10. I'm trying to get him into the car. And this helpful parent walks by. And this is in a fairly, nice neighborhood. And she's like, oh, could you use some help? Yeah, I could. And she's like, have you tried Rescue Remedy? I'm like, no, I haven't. And she sprays it on me, and it was some kind of floral thing, which then, of course, well, maybe not, of course, but my child freaked out even more because he didn't like the smell of it, and she just then kind of rolled her eyes because her cure didn't work. But it's not, you don't want this, right? Family members, especially if it's your first child, I could do that better than you, dear. And professionals, there's a lot of research on the damage that happens when professionals who you as a parent deem to know more than you are criticizing you. And again, you take that external blame and embarrassment and internalize it. Wong, who is Chinese and I believe from Hong Kong, looked at this as well within her society in Hong Kong, and she expressed that there are differences based on your culture. And so I won't, pretend to be an expert in any way on this, but if your culture or your societal beliefs are that, you need to save face, you shouldn't make a fuss, things like that, and your child is making a fuss and you're having a really hard time saving face, it can influence you even more.